Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to talk about this one gambit in particular that I find kind of fascinating. And it's because weaker players always want to play gambits. They want to play all kinds of weird gambits. They want to play crazy gambits. They want to play like the Halloween gambit, the Jerome gambit, anything under the sun. If it's a gambit, they want to play it. They want to get an exciting position where anything can happen. And they're very excited about playing all these gambits. But this gambit is sort of an exception, because I never see lower rated players even try this gambit. As a matter of fact, very few players are even aware that this gambit exists below a certain rating. But I see this gambit played a lot by players that are very high rated, guys that are like over 2,400, the international masters, grand masters will play this gambit. And it's a gambit called the Mengerini gambit, and it's played against the Sicilian. It goes e4, c5, and then you have the Mengerini variation beginning with this move pawn to a3. And then after knight c6, you have this move pawn to b4, which begins this gambit. And it's a really scary gambit, really dangerous gambit, and probably more importantly, it's sound, which is weird. And I'm going to get into that. But anyways, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on that notification icon. So I'm not going to turn on the evaluation bar right away, just because I want you to kind of absorb everything that's going on and just kind of look at it and judge it based off of its own merits, so that you can kind of see what White's after. Now, the initial thing that White's after, I guess you could say, is just central control. Like after c takes b4, a takes b4, I'm going to take, and then White's going to play c3, knight c6, d4, and just go after this big center. That's easy enough to understand. But here's where I have a hard time understanding it, because I've played this position a lot with the black pieces, and I've always played d5, e takes d5, queen d5, knight a3, so the threat is knight b5, and also, bishop c4 and possibly knight to c4. But again, I can meet all this by developing. Like I can play bishop f5, and on knight b5, I can simply play rook c8 and prevent knight c7 check. So in my mind, I'm looking at this really traditionally. I'm thinking, well, okay, he's got one extra central pawn, but his king is on an open file. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces developed to his 1, and he's sacrificed a pawn for this. How does this make any sense at all? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I see there's compensation. There's a center, okay? Like, White has a center. So I see there's compensation. But he sacrificed a pawn for that center, and I have 4 pieces out. Shouldn't Black be better? Well, the answer to that, and this, the evaluation, the overall evaluation of this position kind of blows my mind, is probably White's better. And that's why you see this played by guys that are like 2,400, 2,500, and they'll play it against other 2,500s, because 2,500s with Black will struggle for the same reason I'm struggling. They're like, why am I not better? And it's just like this very uncomfortable situation where like it's not clear how you finish the development of your king side. In most openings where you're up a whole bunch of tempo in an open position, you've actually developed your king side first. In this opening, you've developed your queen side first, and it's not clear how you're going to get your king side developed quickly enough to make up for the fact that you need to regain that central control. Now, what's interesting is if we turn on the evaluation bar in the lines says that White's better, and it really says that the only move that White has where it maintains its advantage is the move knight takes a7. Like, even a move like bishop f4 that makes tons of logical sense targeting that square is going to run into e5, and then the rapid deployment of the king side is not going to be preventable. So like e5, d takes e5, and then queen e4 check, bishop e3, we get to play a6, and now, unless they want to lose their initiative, that knight's going to have to fly into d6, but then we get this developing move, and now we're going to be able to get our king out of the middle. We're going to be able to play knight f6, the king's going to evacuate. This is very clearly advantage Black at this point, as the eval bar states. But if they don't play bishop f4, if they play the absolute right move, which is to move the knight again, just totally going against what any of us would think, this position is probably advantage White. We have to take that knight, the rook takes, and then there's these minor annoying issues on this diagonal is one of the places where we have annoying issues. We basically have to do the same thing as before. We have to play e5 to try to sort of evacuate with this bishop, try to get the bishop out. And we can sort of equalize very quickly, like if they take it, like d takes e5, we can play queen takes e5. They're going to have to exchange queens. If they don't, like now we're just developing our king side very rapidly with tempo. Knight f6, bishop c5. So we're looking at this, maybe this queen exchange. Queen e2 takes bishop e2, bishop c5, so that we give our king a place to hide. And notice that they get in this bishop b5 check anyway, and we're just going to have to sidestep with our king. And then the rook goes to a2 or something. And this position should just be equality. Everybody has the same number of pawns. I didn't get to castle, but that's not such a big deal. I'll eventually get my king to a good square, and position's approximately level. But what if they don't take it? I mean, and this gets interesting. So like knight f3 is apparently just advantage white. So they can play knight f3 and then like knight f6, knight takes e5. And what's amazing is if I play a move like e takes d4, they're going to have queen d4, and you would think logically if you play queen d4 you should be, at the very least okay. Like this position should be, you would think, advantage black, but white gets his pawn back and your king is still in the middle of the board. So somehow, against all logic and against all reason, this position is actually advantage white, which is absolutely amazing, just starting from this gambit, that this end position would somehow be advantage white. But I mean, at least you survived. I've actually had plenty of games where if you don't play e5 at the right moment, you're not even surviving. You can get into a lot of trouble very quickly. Something like knight f6, knight f3, and then you don't play e5, you play something like a little bit more passive, like maybe you play e6. Queen a4 check. Big problem. Queen a4 check, you don't have a good place to put your king. You haven't been able to play bishop e7 and king f8, so you can't just play these conservative developing moves that you would normally want to play and play e6, bishop e7, king f8, because you're simply worse here. So you would have to like maybe block knight d7 and then knight e5, and then white comes in with everything like knight e5, bishop b5, etc., and you're just completely lost, and as it shows in the evaluation. So even just to play this line where you develop everything on your queen side, you have to be willing to play this e5 and try to equalize, even though in all those continuations, white is gonna be a little bit better here. You're not actually doing all that great. You're a little bit worse in these positions, but you essentially have to be willing to play e5, either on this move or the next move. It might be possible to play knight f6, knight f3, e5, but basically you have to play e5. So what should you do if you face this gambit? Like, what is the appropriate response? Well, probably the absolute most appropriate response to this gambit is to decline it, because it's sound. Like, as far as I can tell, this gambit is sound. And there's two solid ways to decline it. You can either play knight f6 or you can play e5. And they're both kind of similar. Like, e5, since taking and then bishop takes is good for black. White basically has to play b5, knight d4, c3, knight e6. And this position is supposed to be close to equal, although the computer gives this as a little bit better for black. But I'd take that with a small grain of salt. I think it's probably just dead equal. You can see it gives kind of dead equal right here, this very top line. That's kind of what I would call it. So the other option is you can try knight f6, which is very similar. Again, this capture is not going to be any good. Knight captures e4 should just be advantage black. White's the one with the weak pawns, and black has more pieces out, and there's really no compensation for whatever is going on here. So black is clearly better after, taking the center pawn in exchange for the c pawn. So white, again, has to play b5, and this is very similar to the other line. We play knight d4, c3, and then knight back to e6, and then we play this variation from here. And there is one interesting game that we can look at here. There's this Ian Nepomniachtchi versus Daniil Dubov, which took place in this variation, continued. We'll just get into the line here. After knight e6, that game continued with d3. And then we have g6. And this game was actually played very accurately. Like, if you look at the game review, I think, like, they give, 89.5%, but, like, no, a couple misses near the end and some mistakes, some inaccuracies. Well, the opening was played very accurately. Let's put it that way. Like, the opening phase of the game was played very accurately. Continuing, we have g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, and if we just take a look at the analysis here, the position is a little bit better for black, actually, according to the engine, but the position is still closed, and there's still a lot of chess to play. But this is kind of the direction I would go. I would go the direction that Daniil Dubov went against Ian Nepomniachtchi. He seemed to get a good game. It seemed to be fairly easy for him to get a good game. This knight f6 and then knight d4 back to e6. This seems like it's pretty straightforward. We get to play g6, we get to play bishop g7, and then we just kind of play this very normal, very natural chess. Again, this a6 move targeting this sort of annoying pawn on b5, and then after he opens up the lines, this should just be very clear slight edge black, just any way you slice it. Black is going to make this sort of normal expansion on the queen. Dubov's play is very clean and very straightforward, and he just continues to just play for a win from here. Now this game actually, I think it ended in a draw. So like if you look at the game review, I believe this game, the final result was a draw, I want to say. But that doesn't change the fact that, yeah, it was a draw, just 1/2, but that doesn't change the fact that black was playing a little bit better out of the opening, and this was apparently how we're supposed to meet this. We are supposed to just decline the gambit, and these positions might be, we'll just call them equal. Decline the gambit and these positions are equal. But if you want to play a gambit with white that is not only 100% sound, but could lead to some quick victories, even against very strong rated players, against very high rated players, this Manjari gambit, very good choice. Very good option for a gambit to play. But anyways, hope you found this video helpful. Hope you learned something new about chess. And hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.